Oh my gosh. Good morning, New Covenant.
Good morning.
You know, it has been 23 months since I have been in this pulpit to deliver. 23 months. And I told you at that time, when I preached at the end of February in 2018, that was that was the hardest sermon I had ever had to write. And it was because at that time it was really the content of the sermon, because Pastor, in her unlimited wisdom, and I don't mean that facetiously, asked me to preach on God is Me in a black church on Black History Month. So I changed the theme to God is You, and it worked. But I come to you now 23 months later, saying again that this now is actually the hardest sermon I've ever had to write. And this time it's not because of the content of the sermon, but the content of my life. And some of you know some of this, and some of you know more of it. But it is my hope this morning that you will hear what I have to say. Because as some of the preachers in the room will know, this is a sermon that I need to preach to me. And I hope that as I preach to myself, as God preaches to me, that you will hear something different. Will you pray with me?
Amen.
God, thank you for this time to come in this place. Come communally to worship you. To be with one another in this time, no matter where the week has taken us. Lord, to take even just a couple hours and just pause. Just breathe and be thankful for all that we have in the midst of the messiness. We thank you. We praise you. Amen.
Amen.
So, this morning I've been thinking a whole lot for a long time about faith. I'm not certain that we really talk about faith that much in the church. I mean, we use it kind of like a buzzword, but I don't think we really consider what it means to have faith. And in particular, the question that I would like, if you would allow me a few moments this morning to ask, what is your faith in? What is your faith in? Now, I'm not going to be like most preachers that may be doing something this morning and just say, your faith only needs to be in God. Now, I think your faith does need to be in God. And I also think that sometimes, if we don't recognize all the other things God has placed in our life, and utilize those resources, we're not actually being as faithful as God wants us to be.
That's right.
But I'm a Christian, grew up Baptist, so I'm going to talk about God a little bit, if that's okay. So I do think the first thing I want to start at is talking about faith in God. And I'd like to read this morning from Genesis 22, a story that may be familiar to you. And every verse that I read today will be from the New Revised Standard Version. After these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, and set out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place far away. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. So the two of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father, Abraham, Father. He said, Here I am, my son. He said, The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. God will provide the lamb for the burnt offering. Now, doesn't this sound a little preposterous, knowing what God just told Abraham before? God said to Abraham, you need to go to Moriah, you need to take your son, and you need to sacrifice him. Abraham knows exactly what he is supposed to do. And in the midst of that, when Isaac said, Where is that lamb? Abraham didn't say, Well, it's actually you. He said, God will provide the lamb for the burnt offering. Now, when I see this passage, I really see two things. Well, I see a whole lot of things, but we don't have time for that. There are two main things I want to draw out that I see Abraham exemplifying with this faith in God from this trial. First, faith in God requires courageous, defiant action. When God told him that's what he had to do, he didn't say, well, first let me think about it. He didn't say, well, let me get halfway there and see how I feel. I might want to turn around. He got up and he did what God asked him to do. And it's defiant in the face of everything that would have been telling him to not do that. Because I think you can accurately argue that he's getting ready to murder his son. This isn't a very socially acceptable action he's about to go on, right? But somehow, he finds it in him to be defiant enough to everyone around him to be courageous and do what he feels God is calling him to do. But I understand that this piece is not necessarily relatable because I don't know anybody who's had to be sacrificing their kid, right? So I think that it's helpful to think of defiance in a way that Derek Bell says in Faces at the Bottom of the Well. To initiate the reconsideration, I want to set forth this proposition, which will be easier to reject than refute. Black people will never gain full equality in this country. Even those Herculean efforts we hail as successful will produce no more than temporary peaks of progress. Short-lived victories that slide into irrelevance as racial patterns adapt in ways that maintain white dominance. This is a hard-to-accept fact that all history verifies. We must acknowledge it not as a sign of submission, but as an act of ultimate defiance. We identify with and hail as hero the man or woman willing to face even death without flinching. Why? Because while no one escapes death, those who conquer their dread of it are freed to live more fully. In similar fashion, African Americans must confront and conquer the otherwise deadening reality of our permanent subordinate status. Only in this way can we prevent ourselves from being dragged down by society's racial hostility. Beyond survival lies the potential to perceive more clearly both the reason and the means for further struggle. Now, I admit that a lot of people might not like what Derek Bell's saying there. And for a long time, it really tripped me up. How this lifelong activist, first recognized black person to receive tenure at Harvard Law School, would say this. But I think what's important to remember is that he's not asking us to lay down and die. He's saying in order for us to actually defy what society is telling us, we have to recognize the reality of the situation in order to move forward. This faith in God requires that kind of courageous defiance. But in the midst of that action, I think this story from Abraham shows something else. that as we're acting courageously and defiantly, faith in God shows that with God, there might just be something impossible that happens. Because again, Abraham knew what he had to do.
Yeah.
And he still thought, God can make it another way. By this kind of absurdity, this almost ridiculous notion, God can make it otherwise. I read for you something that I've written on behalf of research I've done for Dr. Smallwood. At first glance, this seems preposterous, that Abraham would say God would provide the offering. The lamb for the burnt offering is Isaac, and Abraham is the one doing the sacrificing. This is not a delivery service Abraham is providing, but a sacrifice, a killing of his own son on God's command. Abraham knows good and well that not only is Isaac going to die, but that he himself will be the one to kill him. And yet, Abraham had faith that not only could God do something different, but God would do something different. And yet Abraham clung to a faith not based on what he knew, but based on what he did not know. And yet Abraham held strong to a faith that hung its hat not on what is possible, but on what is impossible, knowing that with God all things are possible. He may not be able to imagine or conceive how it could even be so. And honestly, that is irrelevant. What matters is that Abraham does what Kierkegaard says he himself cannot do. That is to plunge confidently into the absurd. It was absurd that he thought God would provide another offering after God's command. But he had faith that it would be so. It was absurd to think that he would simultaneously kill Isaac and have him. But he had faith that it would be so. It was absurd to think that the impossible would be possible. But he had faith that it would be so. Now, perhaps we don't have this understanding of Abraham. Nobody raised their hands when I asked if anybody had to do what Abraham had to do. But maybe we find ourselves more in a situation like Derek Bell describes. We find ourselves facing a permanent and ever-growing beast that has horns of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and many more upon its head. This beast has as its hands the pundits of fascist politics and insidious capitalism, and its feet walk upon the trampled bodies of those it deems disposable. This beast rocks a gold three-piece suit with the best, bloodiest diamonds for comfort, ill-gotten from the economic gains of those over whom it rules, and it wears it just to cover the tattoos on its skin detailing centuries of oppressive laws, ideologies, and theologies that it constantly appeals to in its quest to maintain power over us. Oh, this beast is big, and this beast is terrifying, and this beast is here to stay. In fact, this beast just may be impossible to get rid of. And yet we got a God that is in the business of doing the impossible. And yet we got a God that wants us to act in the midst of seeing what looks to be impossible. And yet we got a God that wants us to walk on together when we see the impossible, knowing that somehow, some way, someday, it just may be possible. Through faith. May it be so. Now, as I said, most preachers would probably stop there. And most preachers would probably be mad that I'm saying we need faith in something else too. Some of y'all might be mad I'm saying that. I'll be in the back, you can tell me. But I really do think that this is the case. Because God places people in our lives for a reason. We are not meant to be going through this world alone. So in addition to faith in God, I think we need to have faith in our community. Read this passage from Acts 2, starting at verse 43. Awe came upon everyone, because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. We have to have faith in our community. When we have faith in our community, there's a few particulars that I see. First, when we have faith in our community, we have faith that there is abundance. We have these conversations all the time, especially come election year. How are we going to pay for health care? How are we going to pay for all this public education? How are we going to fix all this infrastructure? But we got billions and billions and billions of dollars going into the military plagiarizing Star Trek so they can go conquer space. But we don't want to give people health care. Okay, let me stop. Let me stop. When we have faith in our community, we have faith in abundance. And I'm telling you, the things I'm talking about are not just at the federal level. If you are paying attention to Metro Nashville right now and the budget crisis that we're in, and the fact that they want to keep this contract with Core Civic, knowing all the stuff that's going on, knowing all the people who are dying, but they want to keep the contract because it's a cheaper thing to do. Because they don't care enough about the people, they only care about their bottom. It is a scarcity mindset. It's not a faith mindset that realizes there is abundance. This came about in particular. There was a first-year student at the Divinity School. Some of you know this too. I called upon some of you for help with this situation. There was an international student at the Divinity School who, for a lot of reasons, was unable to pay all of her bill for last semester. If you know some of the things that international students face, they are legally allowed to only work a certain amount of hours. And, well, you know how school is with work. There's just only certain places you can work. And there's only a certain amount of money you can make. So, well, not only does she have limited wages and limited hours, but because she's an international student, she can't take out loans. So if she's not getting it from work, and she's not getting it from scholarships, and she's not getting it. And what happened was, Vanderbilt came knocking. They wanted their money. And they told this person that if they did not have their bill paid, they would be stripped of enrollment, which means that they would lose their visa status, which means that they would have to go home. And in the midst of that, this person had faith in their community. Faith in the abundance of their community. And by calling on that community, and that community calling on their community, in less than 5 days, this student had $3,000 to pay their bill. There is abundance in this. 5 days, $3,000? Come on. It's out there. The money's out there. Faith in community. Now, along with that, and I think this student represents this too, faith in community is not just faith in abundance, but a faith that your community will actually step up. This is super important in the life of New Covenant right now. Coming off the leaders retreat yesterday morning that a lot of people in this room were at, we have to be able to step up for each other, because I know you saw it deep in your bones, Pastor, when Eric preached on your Appreciation Sunday. You're fighting, but you're tired. And we have to be able to step up as she moves into this transition of retirement. And it doesn't matter whether we're elders or deacons or no official title at all. We have to have faith in this community right here, in each other, that we're going to be able to step up and take care of each other in the midst of all this transition. And this is the case for my life personally too. As I said, the content of my life right now is frankly some of the most difficult stuff I've ever had to go through. And the past 10 or 12 days in particular has really, hold on. It's been a lot. And I've been able to call upon my community, and they have stepped up. And when I say this, I don't mean it in some ethereal philosophical sense that, oh, they always got my back. I mean it like, when I needed a place to stay at night, I was able to go there. When I needed food in my belly multiple times, they were able to feed me. Having faith in my community was tangible. And that's what we have to do for each other. That's what they did in Acts. It didn't say they were just giving thoughts and prayers. It said they were giving up their stuff and actually spreading it out to each other. We have to be able to step up for each other if we're actually going to have faith in this community. There's one more thing, though, with this community piece. Because as you look to the faith in the abundance, and the faith that your community will step up, you have to have faith that you matter.
That's it.
You have to have faith that you actually matter to your community. You have to recognize that the things that you need, your feelings, where you are in life, is actually important. Not just to you, but to your community. Because the text says that they were looking at the goodwill of all people.
That's right.
Not some people, not most people, not a handful of people, but all people. And if you're going to have faith in your community, you have to recognize that you matter so your community knows that you have needs that need to be met. We have to recognize that we matter. Now, it's important to have faith in God. It's important to have faith in community. But as Dr. Smallwood has shown me, there's one more thing you've got to have faith in. You have to have faith in you.
That's right.
Dr. Smallwood and I went to Beersheba Springs with a group of people a few weeks back, and it was a time. We'll say that. We went there to have a conversation about racism. And if you don't know anything about Beersheba Springs, it is the vacation area of Isaac Franklin, the most successful human trader in American history. So we went there to have a conversation about racism. And, after that long day, the good doctor and I went back to her living space and had a beverage. And I won't say what it is, but it wasn't milk. And we drank that whole bottle, didn't we? Just trying to figure this stuff out. But in that moment, Dr. Smallwood offered me the most poignant challenge to my conception of faith. Because you see this book, Pastor saw my books this morning. She said, "You preaching from all those books?" I said, "I don't have electronic copies like y'all." But this book from Soren Kierkegaard, Fear and Trembling, has been the basis of a lot of how I look at faith. And Dr. Smallwood said, "Well, hold on. Let me show you something." And now I'm paraphrasing, not quoting, so you can correct me later. But one of the things that she said was that the way she perceives my faith is that all of the power that I see in this world is somehow out here, completely outside of myself. Now, it might be in God, and God certainly has power, but the point was, I was looking at faith as though I had no power at all. And she said, what I am failing to recognize is that I don't see the deep well of untapped power and strength that is within me. This well that when you really tap into it, will make you do things that you never thought were possible. That's a faith that I didn't understand until you. But it makes sense. Let me read from John, one of the most confusing passages I've ever come across in my life. This is 14, starting at 11, when he's talking to his disciples at the Last Supper. Believe me that I am in God and that God is in me. But if you do not, then believe me because of the works themselves. Very truly I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact will do greater works than these. How, Sway? How? If you have a certain Christological position, how do you see us doing greater works than God? I mean, if you think, and I'm not telling you this is what you need to think, but I'm saying is if you think that Jesus came and was a sacrifice for the sins of everybody who has ever come, everyone who is there, and everyone who is to come, then you have some big questions to answer if you think we're going to do greater things than that. That's confusing to me. But it doesn't negate what you said. Because just because I can't understand the power doesn't mean that I don't have the power. The power that I can tap into without having to see every dimension of it. So what does this faith look like? Well, it's the recognition of that power, and I know as I look in this room that there are lots of people who have been able to tap into that power.
Oh, yes.
That power when everything is coming against you, when you're tired and hungry and sleepy and you might just want to collapse and stop, but somehow you keep putting one foot in front of the other. And sometimes that's from God, and sometimes that's from your community, but also sometimes it's just you doing what you need to do for you.
That's right. That's right. That's good teaching. That is. Good teaching.
But we run into trouble if we think that we only get to use this power once. Because that power is always within us, ready to be tapped time and time and time again. I read from a book called Crafting Lives. It's about enslaved and free black craftspeople in New Bern, North Carolina. Catherine Bisher says, central to the story is the sense of agency that artisans like John Rice Green and Temperance Green develop through their skills and personal connections. The belief, or at least the hope, or even the faith, that along with producing useful and well-crafted objects, they could find ways to shape their lives and advance their situations and those of their families. Time and time again, they found or created paths of opportunity through the interstices of racially oppressive laws and customs. In every period, these skilled men and women used whatever power and leverage they possessed towards certain basic goals: to form and protect stable families, to exert some degree of control over their time and their work, to make enough money to establish a home and support a family, to associate freely with friends and family, to speak and to worship without interference, to gain positions of respect and influence within their community, and to vote and organize for their own and future generations' rights and advancement. In the midst of everything these people were facing in this small North Carolina town, real small, they were able to tap into their own power time and time and time again. And I know that the people in this room understand that power. You know, though, sometimes you tap too much. Sometimes your well gets a little dry. And this faith in yourself demands that you have the faith to know that the power that is within you is worth recharging. I don't know how many of y'all were here a couple weeks ago for RJ's ordination, but if you're anything like me, that sermon that Reverend Mitchell preached that was meant to be for RJ, preached to me too.
Oh, yes.
And one of the things Reverend Mitchell was talking about was these challenges of recharging. And I offer you direct quotations from the video because I cannot say it better than he did. You cannot serve if you allow your work to sharpen your pencil down to the eraser. Because you're going to get to the point where you're trying to write and write and write and you got no lead and all you're doing is just taking stuff away. Reverend Mitchell said, if you're dipping from an empty well, everything you give is counterfeit. You are going to dip that bucket down and nothing's going to come out, and everything you give from that bucket is going to be fake. Reverend Mitchell said, if you do not make, take, steal, or borrow the time and space to repair, then you are not serving God's people. And I would add that you aren't serving yourself either. We have to take the time to recharge and have faith in ourselves that we are worth it. We are worth recharging. Faith has been very important to me over the course of my whole life. I almost lost my faith at age 12. I was ready to renounce God. In fact, I had said it in my head. But I told God, I said, this is a bold move. I said, you got one more chance. Little 12-year-old me telling God. But I know that there might be some people in here who have been there too. And I don't think these cookie-cutter answers that churches give to just trust in God and just sit back and let God take care of everything are actually going to help anyone. Now, I think we need to have faith in God. That's my bias. But I also think we need to have faith in our community. And I also think we need to have faith in ourselves. Because if we don't, then we're not going to do what we're called to do. Through faith, may it be so. Amen.